She seems perfect, charming, intelligent, deeply empathetic. She listens to your problems with genuine concern, offers thoughtful advice, and makes you feel understood in ways you've never experienced before. Friends and family love her. She's everything you thought you wanted in a partner. 6 months later, you're sitting in your car outside your own apartment, afraid to go inside. You've started questioning your own memory, your own judgment, your own sanity. You feel constantly guilty about things you can't remember doing wrong. You're exhausted from walking on emotional landmines that seem to appear without warning. You've become a stranger to yourself and you can't figure out how it happened. You've encountered what psychologists call the shadow, the unconscious darkness that some people carry like an invisible virus, infecting everyone around them with their unresolved psychological toxicity. These women aren't obviously dangerous. They don't announce their dysfunction with neon signs. They operate below the radar of conscious awareness, using weapons you can't see to fight battles you didn't know you were in. Today, I'm going to expose the 6 types of psychologically dangerous women who destroy men not through obvious cruelty, but through subtle psychological manipulation that turns your own mind against you. Because the most dangerous predators are the ones you invite into your life thinking they're saving you. The most destructive women in your life won't be the ones who scream, hit, or obviously mistreat you. They'll be the ones who seem caring, sensitive, and deeply emotional, while systematically transferring their psychological problems into your mind. They'll make you feel like you're helping them heal, while they're actually making you sick. This transfer happens through mechanisms you can't see. You start taking responsibility for emotions you didn't create, solving problems you didn't cause, and managing reactions that belong to someone else's unresolved trauma. Without realizing it, you become a container for her mental waste. The process disguises itself as intimacy. She shares her deepest fears, her childhood wounds, her emotional struggles with such apparent vulnerability that you feel honored to be trusted with such private information. What you don't realize is that she's not sharing for connection. She's downloading for relief. Each download shifts a piece of her emotional burden onto your shoulders. You start carrying her anxiety, absorbing her depression, managing her triggers, and organizing your life around her instability. Gradually, her inner chaos becomes your external reality. The most dangerous aspect is how this makes you complicit in your own colonization. You believe you're being supportive while enabling her to avoid responsibility for her own healing. You become addicted to feeling needed while she becomes dependent on being rescued. Psychologically dangerous women operate through constant projection, the unconscious mechanism where they dump their unacknowledged qualities onto you and then react to you, as if you possess those qualities. This creates a psychological matrix where you're never relating to the real you. You're always relating to her distorted perception of who you are. When she accuses you of being selfish, she's projecting her own selfishness that she can't acknowledge. When she claims you're emotionally unavailable, she's transferring her own emotional walls onto you. When she insists you're trying to control her, she's deflecting from her own controlling behaviors. The projection matrix is particularly destructive because it makes authentic communication impossible. You're never discussing actual issues. You're always defending yourself against accusations that don't match your reality. Every conversation becomes an argument about who you are rather than what you've done. This constant defense against false accusations gradually erodes your sense of self. You start questioning your own perceptions, doubting your own character, and accepting responsibility for problems that originate in her psyche rather than your behavior. The matrix becomes self-reinforcing because your attempts to defend yourself are interpreted as evidence of the very qualities she's projecting onto you. Your frustration with being misunderstood becomes proof of your anger issues. Your exhaustion from constant defense becomes evidence of your emotional withdrawal. The most sophisticated form of psychological manipulation involves presenting as a victim while actually operating as a predator. These women have mastered the art of gaining sympathy and support while using that sympathy to control and manipulate the people around them. The victim presentation is carefully constructed to trigger your protective instincts. She shares stories of past trauma, current struggles, and ongoing victimization that make you want to rescue, protect, and defend her. Your natural masculine impulse to provide security becomes the hook that keeps you trapped in her psychological web. But the victim presentation is tactical rather than authentic. While she may have experienced real trauma, she's weaponized that trauma to avoid responsibility for her current behavior. Every criticism becomes persecution, every boundary becomes abandonment, every request for accountability becomes further victimization. The flip happens gradually as you become more invested in her well-being. The woman who seemed so fragile and in need of protection reveals herself to be remarkably skilled at psychological warfare. The victim becomes the prosecutor, the wounded becomes the warrior, the helpless becomes the handler. This flip is disorienting because it contradicts everything you thought you understood about the relationship dynamic. The person you've been trying to save starts treating you like you're the problem. The victim you've been protecting starts attacking you as the perpetrator. Some women operate as emotional parasites, feeding off the psychological energy of others while contributing nothing substantial to the relationship beyond their need to be fed. These women don't want partnership. They want hosts who can sustain their emotional dysfunction indefinitely. The emotional parasite presents as someone who desperately needs love, understanding, and support due to her tragic past or current circumstances. She positions herself as someone who would be amazing if only she could heal from her wounds, achieve her goals, or overcome her obstacles. This presentation triggers your rescuer complex, making you believe that your love, support, and dedication can transform her into the person she has the potential to become. You invest enormous energy trying to heal someone who has no intention of getting better, because getting better would end the parasitic relationship she depends on. The parasitic dynamic creates a cruel irony, where your efforts to help her actually enable her dysfunction. Every time you rescue her from consequences, solve her problems, or provide emotional regulation she should be providing for herself, you strengthen her dependency while weakening your own psychological resources. The parasite never gets full because the hunger isn't really about the specific support you provide. It's about the power dynamic where she controls your energy through appearing to need it. No amount of giving ever satisfies someone whose real addiction is to being given to. If you're starting to recognize patterns in your own relationships that match these psychological manipulation strategies, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. What I'm revealing today about covert psychological abuse could save you years of confusion and help you identify dangerous dynamics before they destroy your mental health. The mask controller operates through maintaining a perfect public image while being completely different in private. She presents as kind, thoughtful, and emotionally mature to the outside world while revealing controlling, critical, and manipulative behaviors when no one else is watching. This dual personality creates profound psychological confusion because it makes you question your own perception of reality. The woman everyone else sees as wonderful is the same woman who makes your private life miserable through constant criticism, emotional manipulation, and psychological control. The mask controller uses her public persona as a weapon against you. When you try to discuss her private behavior, she can point to dozens of people who think she's amazing. Your complaints about her treatment seem unreasonable when compared to her reputation for kindness and consideration. This dynamic isolates you psychologically because no one else sees the behavior you're experiencing. Friends and family think you're lucky to be with such a wonderful woman, making it impossible to get support for dealing with her private manipulation and control. The mask controller also uses her public image to manipulate your behavior. She expects you to maintain the illusion of her perfection by never discussing her private behavior, never showing frustration with her treatment, and always presenting as the happy couple she needs for her image management. Some women unconsciously create chaos and drama as a way of managing their own psychological instability. They can't tolerate calm, peaceful environments because internal chaos demands external expression. Being around them means living in a constant state of manufactured emergency. The chaos generator creates problems that require your immediate attention and emotional investment. She manufactures crises, amplifies minor issues into major conflicts, and ensures that there's always some drama requiring your involvement and energy. This pattern serves multiple psychological functions for her. It keeps you too busy managing immediate problems to notice larger patterns in her behavior. It positions her as constantly needing your help and support. It creates intensity that she mistakes for intimacy. The chaos also serves as a defense mechanism against genuine emotional connection. By keeping relationships in crisis mode, she avoids the vulnerability required for authentic intimacy. Drama becomes a substitute for depth. Intensity replaces genuine connection. Living with a chaos generator is psychologically exhausting because you never get to rest. There's always another crisis to manage, another emergency to solve, another disaster to prevent. Your nervous system remains in constant activation, leading to chronic stress and eventual burnout. The boundary violator systematically tests, pushes, and breaks your personal boundaries while making you feel guilty for having boundaries in the first place. She operates on the principle that love means unlimited access to your time, energy, space, and emotional resources. Boundary violations start small and escalate gradually. She might show up unannounced, go through your phone, make plans without consulting you, or share private information with others. Each violation is presented as evidence of her love and investment in the relationship. When you attempt to establish or maintain boundaries, she responds with hurt, anger, or accusations of not truly loving her. She reframes your need for personal space as rejection, your desire for privacy as deception, your request for respect as evidence of emotional withdrawal. The boundary violator uses emotional manipulation to make you complicit in your own boundary erosion. She makes you feel selfish for wanting alone time, controlling for wanting to make your own decisions, and distant for not sharing every thought and feeling immediately. Over time, boundary violations reshape your entire life around her needs and preferences. You lose connection with friends she doesn't like, abandon activities she finds threatening, and modify your behavior to avoid triggering her abandonment fears. The gaslighter systematically undermines your perception of reality by denying events that happened, rewriting history to favor her narrative, and making you question your own memory and judgment. This psychological manipulation is designed to make you dependent on her version of reality. Gaslighting operates through consistent denial of your experience. When you remember her saying something hurtful, she insists she never said it. When you recall her doing something damaging, she claims it happened differently. When you point out patterns in her behavior, she acts like you're imagining things. The gaslighter also uses selective memory to support her narratives. She remembers every mistake you've ever made while forgetting her own harmful actions. She recalls your worst moments in perfect detail while having convenient amnesia about her problematic behavior. This systematic reality distortion gradually erodes your confidence in your own perceptions. You start second-guessing your memory, questioning your judgment, and accepting her version of events even when it contradicts your direct experience. The gaslighter often presents herself as the reasonable one trying to help you understand reality correctly. She positions her reality distortion as care for your well-being, making you feel grateful for her patience with your apparently faulty perceptions. The emotional terrorist uses your emotional investment in the relationship as leverage to control your behavior through threats of emotional destruction. She holds the relationship hostage to ensure compliance with her demands and preferences. Emotional terrorism operates through creating fear of emotional consequences. She threatens to leave if you don't meet her demands, threatens to hurt herself if you set boundaries, threatens to destroy your reputation if you challenge her behavior. These threats don't have to be explicit to be effective. She might simply withdraw affection, create dramatic scenes, or manufacture crises whenever you act independently. The message becomes clear: comply or face emotional warfare. The emotional terrorist also uses your care for her well-being against you. She makes you responsible for her emotional state, her mental health, and her general happiness. Any action that displeases her becomes an attack on her psychological stability. This emotional hostage-taking creates a relationship where you're constantly managing her emotions rather than expressing your own needs. You become responsible for maintaining her stability while receiving no stability in return. The identity thief gradually replaces your authentic self with a version that serves her psychological needs. She systematically eliminates aspects of your personality, interests, and relationships that don't align with her preferences or insecurities. Identity theft happens through subtle discouragement of activities, friends, and interests she finds threatening. She expresses hurt when you spend time with certain friends, shows disapproval of hobbies she doesn't understand, and creates drama around activities that take attention away from her. The identity thief also shapes your personality through selective reinforcement. She rewards behaviors that serve her needs while punishing authentic expressions that make her uncomfortable. Gradually, you learn to modify yourself to avoid triggering her negative reactions. This process is particularly insidious because it happens gradually and feels like natural relationship adaptation. You don't notice that you're losing yourself because the changes happen incrementally over time. The identity thief often justifies this process as helping you become a better version of yourself. She presents her demands for change as love-motivated improvement, rather than controlling manipulation designed to serve her psychological needs. The recovery prevention agent unconsciously sabotages your attempts at personal growth, healing, and positive change because your improvement threatens the psychological dynamic she depends on. She needs you to remain psychologically damaged to maintain her sense of superiority and control. Recovery prevention happens through subtle discouragement of therapy, personal development, and positive changes. She finds reasons why self-improvement is selfish, unnecessary, or threatening to the relationship. She creates crises that interfere with your healing activities. The prevention agent also undermines your progress by triggering old patterns and behaviors whenever you start making positive changes. She knows exactly which buttons to push to make you revert to previous dysfunction that she's more comfortable managing. This sabotage is particularly cruel because it targets your attempts to become healthier and more functional. The person who claims to love you actively works to keep you stuck in patterns that serve her needs rather than supporting your growth. The recovery prevention agent often presents her sabotage as protecting the relationship from change. She makes you feel guilty for growing beyond the dynamic that brought you together, even when that dynamic was unhealthy. Most men miss the early warning signs of psychological danger because they're looking for obvious red flags instead of subtle pattern disruptions. The most dangerous women don't announce their toxicity. They slowly normalize abnormal behavior until your reality becomes completely distorted. The first warning sign is the speed of intimacy acceleration. Psychologically dangerous women often push for deep emotional connection, exclusive commitment, or major life decisions much faster than healthy relationships naturally develop. This isn't passion, it's psychological urgency driven by their need to secure a host before you can fully evaluate their character. Another critical warning sign is the isolation pattern. She gradually creates distance between you and your support systems through subtle criticism of your friends, family, and activities. She doesn't forbid these connections directly. She makes them emotionally costly through hurt feelings, manufactured crises, or passive-aggressive responses whenever you invest time elsewhere. The third warning sign is reality negotiation. The subtle but persistent attempts to modify your perception of events, conversations, and behaviors. She doesn't gaslight aggressively at first. She just offers alternative interpretations that favor her narrative while making you question your initial reactions. Watch for emotional temperature changes that don't match situational triggers. If she has extreme emotional reactions to minor events or completely inappropriate emotional responses to significant situations, you're seeing evidence of internal psychological chaos that will eventually become your external reality. Understanding how psychological toxicity spreads from dangerous women to their partners requires recognizing that emotional states are contagious through mirror neuron activation and unconscious behavioral mimicry. You literally start adopting her emotional patterns without conscious awareness. The infection begins with emotional attunement that feels like deep connection. You start synchronizing with her emotional rhythms, matching her energy levels, and responding to her psychological states as if they were your own. This attunement creates the illusion of intimacy while actually establishing psychological dominance. As the infection progresses, you begin internalizing her emotional vocabulary. Her ways of interpreting events, assigning meaning to behaviors, and categorizing experiences become your default frameworks. You start seeing the world through her psychological filters rather than maintaining your own perspective. The final stage involves complete psychological integration, where her emotional patterns become indistinguishable from your own. You can't tell where her psychological influence ends and your authentic responses begin. You've been psychologically colonized while believing you were emotionally connecting. This infection process is particularly dangerous because it feels like personal growth and deepening intimacy. You interpret the psychological changes as becoming more sensitive, more emotionally aware, and more deeply connected when you're actually becoming more psychologically dependent and less authentically yourself. Psychologically dangerous women excel at creating trauma bonds, psychological attachments that form through cycles of intense stress followed by relief, creating addictive emotional patterns that become difficult to break even when the relationship is clearly harmful. Trauma bonding begins with creating artificial highs and lows in the relationship dynamic. She generates crises that create intense stress, then provides relief from that stress, making you grateful for the return to baseline rather than questioning why the stress existed in the first place. The bonding intensifies through intermittent reinforcement, where positive experiences become unpredictable rewards that you work increasingly hard to earn. The uncertainty about when you'll receive affection, approval, or emotional connection creates psychological addiction similar to gambling addiction. Trauma bonds also develop through shared intense experiences that feel like special connection, but are actually manufactured drama designed to create psychological dependency. You start believing that the intensity of your emotional responses proves the depth of your connection, rather than recognizing it as evidence of psychological manipulation. The trap becomes complete when you start equating the trauma bond with true love. The intensity of your emotional attachment, the difficulty of imagining life without her, and the fear of losing the connection all feel like evidence of deep love rather than symptoms of psychological addiction. Breaking trauma bonds requires recognizing that intensity is not intimacy, that emotional addiction is not love, and that fear of loss is not evidence of value. Real love creates security and growth, not anxiety and dependence. Dangerous women often use social proof as a weapon to validate their behavior and invalidate your concerns. They surround themselves with people who support their narrative while isolating you from anyone who might offer alternative perspectives on the relationship dynamic. Social proof weaponization begins with carefully curated friend groups that share her worldview and support her victim narratives. These allies provide constant validation for her perspective, while treating your concerns as evidence of your deficiencies rather than legitimate relationship issues. She also uses social media strategically to create public narratives about your relationship that don't match your private experience. The perfect couple photos, the loving posts about your partnership, and the public displays of affection create social pressure to maintain the illusion rather than address the reality. The weapon becomes particularly powerful when she recruits your own friends and family to her perspective through careful impression management and strategic sharing of information. She presents herself as the reasonable, caring partner while subtly portraying you as difficult, unreasonable, or emotionally unstable. This social proof manipulation makes it nearly impossible to get objective feedback about the relationship, because everyone in your social circle has been influenced by her carefully constructed narrative. Your reality becomes increasingly isolated while her version gains social validation. Many psychologically dangerous women create financial dependencies and entanglements that make leaving the relationship economically costly, adding practical barriers to the psychological barriers they've already established. Financial entanglement often begins with seemingly innocent shared expenses, joint accounts, or financial interdependence that appears to be normal relationship progression. However, these arrangements gradually shift in ways that increase your financial obligations while reducing your financial independence. She might encourage you to take on shared debts for her benefits, co-sign for obligations that primarily serve her interests, or make financial decisions that increase your responsibility for her well-being. Each financial entanglement makes leaving more complicated and expensive. The strategy also involves creating lifestyle inflation that requires your income to maintain. She encourages spending patterns, living arrangements, or financial commitments that stretch your resources while making her comfortable, creating financial pressure that keeps you trapped even when the relationship becomes unbearable. Financial manipulation can also involve sabotaging your career advancement, discouraging income-increasing opportunities, or creating crises that interfere with your professional development. This ensures your continued financial dependence while limiting your options for economic independence. When you begin recognizing the psychological damage and attempting to heal from toxic relationship patterns, dangerous women often escalate their manipulation tactics to prevent your recovery and maintain psychological control. Recovery sabotage begins with minimizing your concerns and reframing your healing attempts as attacks on the relationship. Your desire for therapy becomes selfishness. Your need for space becomes abandonment, and your attempts at boundary setting become evidence of your unwillingness to work on the relationship. The sabotage escalates through crisis manufacturing designed to interrupt your healing activities. She creates emergencies that require your immediate attention whenever you're scheduled for therapy, self-care activities, or time with supportive friends who might encourage your continued growth. She also uses your own healing language against you, adopting therapy terminology to pathologize your behavior while avoiding accountability for her own. Your attempts to communicate healthily become evidence of your emotional manipulation, while her manipulation becomes reframed as justified responses to your behavior. The most sophisticated sabotage involves appearing to support your healing while subtly undermining it. She might encourage therapy while selecting therapists who align with her perspective, support your boundaries while violating them consistently, or claim to want change while sabotaging every attempt at genuine relationship improvement. The fundamental truth about psychologically dangerous women is that they operate below the radar of conscious awareness, using your own positive qualities against you. Your desire to help becomes the mechanism for your own psychological destruction. Your capacity for love becomes the weakness they exploit. These women aren't necessarily evil or deliberately malicious. They're psychologically unconscious, operating from unhealed wounds and unintegrated shadows that seek external targets for internal problems. They genuinely don't understand the damage they cause because they lack the self-awareness to recognize their own psychological patterns. The danger lies in their unconsciousness combined with your consciousness. Your awareness and empathy make you vulnerable to their projections and manipulations. Your desire to understand and help makes you an ideal host for their psychological parasitism. Protection requires developing the ability to recognize these patterns quickly and respond appropriately. This means trusting your emotional responses when relationships feel draining, chaotic, or confusing. It means maintaining boundaries even when boundary setting is presented as unloving. Most importantly, protection requires understanding that you cannot heal someone who doesn't want to be healed. You cannot love someone into psychological health. You cannot sacrifice yourself to save someone who is determined to remain unconscious. The women worth investing in are those who take responsibility for their own psychological health, who do their own emotional work, and who bring consciousness rather than chaos to relationships. They enhance your life rather than consuming it, support your growth rather than sabotaging it, and contribute to the relationship rather than just taking from it. Healthy women don't require you to lose yourself to love them. They don't need you to become psychologically smaller so they can feel bigger. They don't drain your energy to fuel their dysfunction or use your empathy as a weapon against your well-being. The path to protection involves developing discernment between genuine vulnerability and manipulative victimhood, between authentic emotional needs and parasitic emotional demands, between real intimacy and psychological invasion. It requires trusting your instincts even when those instincts contradict someone's carefully constructed image. If this analysis of covert psychological manipulation has helped you recognize dangerous patterns in your own relationships, subscribe to this channel for more insights into protecting your mental health from people who present as helpers while actually being harmers. Hit that notification bell because understanding these dynamics could save you years of psychological damage disguised as love. Share this video with any man who needs to understand that the most dangerous women are often the ones who seem the most caring, because true care builds you up rather than breaking you down from the inside out.